I am Ellen, 32 years old, and until recently, I was the invisible backbone of Secure Solutions Incorporated. For 5 years, I poured my heart into that company, solving problems no one else could tackle. When my boss Marcus told me I was not leadership material, something inside me finally snapped. After years of thankless dedication, I made a decision that would change everything. I smiled, drove home, and switched off my phone. What happened next shocked even me. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever felt undervalued at work. My journey at Secure Solutions began 6 years ago, fresh out of college, with a degree in computer science from Stanford University. I still remember my first day walking into that glass building with butterflies in my stomach and dreams in my heart. The company was a mid-sized tech firm specializing in security software for financial institutions with about 200 employees. Not a giant corporation, but respected in the industry for innovative solutions. I started as a junior systems analyst, eager to prove myself. From day one, I demonstrated a natural talent for identifying and fixing complex coding issues that even senior team members struggled with. My ability to troubleshoot and implement elegant solutions quickly caught the attention of management. Within my first year, I was handling critical system components that formed the backbone of our flagship product. Ellen, you have a gift for spotting problems before they become disasters, my first supervisor, Thomas, would say. He was a kind mentor who encouraged my growth before he left for another company. The office became my second home. I formed close friendships with Jessica from the marketing department and Michael from customer support. We would often grab lunch together in the small cafe across the street, sharing stories and supporting each other through workplace challenges. You work too hard, Jessica would always tell me as she watched me stay late night after night. The company is lucky to have you. I would just smile and say, I love solving puzzles. This is fun for me. That was partly true, but I also genuinely cared about the success of Secure Solutions. As time passed, I developed specialized knowledge of our systems that no one else in the company possessed. I built a reputation as the go-to problem solver. When the servers crashed at 2 a.m, I was the one who got the call. When a client reported a security vulnerability, I was tasked with finding and patching it. When new team members needed training on our proprietary systems, I was the one who conducted the sessions. I never hesitated to work weekends or stay late. I canceled dinner plans with friends and missed family gatherings to handle work emergencies. During the massive system migration project last year, I worked 14 days straight without a day off. My dedication went beyond professional obligation. I truly believed in the company and my future there. My personnel file bulged with commendations. Ellen resolved critical system failure, preventing potential $500,000 client loss. Ellen identified and patched security vulnerability before it could be exploited. Ellen streamlined authentication process, improving user experience by 40%. I had hopes of advancing into leadership. I imagined myself heading the technical department one day, implementing the innovative ideas I had for improving our products and processes. I kept a notebook filled with suggestions for efficiency improvements and potential new features. During my annual reviews, I always expressed my desire to grow within the company. There were early warning signs that my contributions were being taken for granted. My suggestions in meetings were often acknowledged with a quick nod before the conversation moved on. The overtime I put in became expected rather than appreciated. The emergency calls became so routine that no one even thanked me anymore for sacrificing my personal time. You know, you should ask for compensation for all these extra hours, Michael suggested once after I mentioned canceling yet another weekend trip to handle a system issue. It will pay off when promotion time comes, I replied confidently. They know what I bring to the table. Looking back, I realize how naive that perspective was. I mistook being used for being valued. I confused being necessary with being respected. But at the time, I was fully invested in the company, believing my hard work would eventually be recognized and rewarded. Every morning, I arrived 30 minutes early to get a head start on the day. Every evening, I was among the last to leave, making sure all systems were running smoothly. I maintained detailed documentation of all our processes and created contingency plans for potential system failures. I even developed my own diagnostic tools to monitor our systems more effectively. If only I had recognized sooner that being irreplaceable does not guarantee advancement. Sometimes it can actually prevent it. Why would they promote the person holding everything together behind the scenes? They needed me right where I was invisibly maintaining the foundation that others built their success upon. But at that point in my career, I still believed that merit and hard work were the primary factors in professional advancement. I was about to learn a painful but necessary lesson about workplace dynamics and my own value. The email announcement came on a Tuesday morning. Secure Solutions is seeking a team lead for the Technical Operations Department. Interested candidates should submit their applications by Friday. My heart raced as I read those words. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, a chance to step into a formal leadership role. The position would involve overseeing a team of 5 analysts, coordinating with other departments, and contributing to strategic planning. It was exactly the kind of role I had envisioned for myself, a perfect stepping stone toward my career goals. I spent that entire evening crafting my application. I detailed my 5 years of experience with the company, highlighted my technical achievements, and outlined my vision for improving team efficiency and product quality. I included specific examples of informal leadership I had demonstrated, like mentoring new hires and coordinating emergency response protocols. "This application is stellar," Jessica said when I showed it to her for feedback. "They would be crazy not to give you this position." I submitted my application a day early and began preparing for the interview. I researched leadership methodologies, practiced answering potential questions, and even bought a new navy blue blazer for the occasion. I felt confident but not complacent. This position meant too much to me to leave anything to chance. The interview was scheduled for the following Wednesday with Marcus, my direct supervisor, and Stephanie from Human Resources. I arrived 15 minutes early, reviewed my notes one last time, and took deep breaths to calm my nerves. "Tell us why you believe you are qualified for this leadership position," Marcus began after the initial pleasantries. For the next 45 minutes, I articulated my vision for the team, drew on specific examples of my problem-solving abilities, and explained how my deep knowledge of our systems would enable me to guide the team effectively. I outlined strategies for improving communication between departments and ideas for streamlining our troubleshooting protocols. The interview seemed to go well. Stephanie nodded approvingly at several of my responses, and Marcus actually wrote down some of my suggestions. As the interview concluded, he smiled and said, "Thank you, Ellen. We appreciate your thoughtful responses and obvious preparation. We will be making a decision by next Monday." I left the room feeling cautiously optimistic. I had done everything I could to demonstrate my qualifications and passion for the role. Now all I could do was wait. The days crawled by. I found myself analyzing every interaction with Marcus, looking for hints about the decision. When Friday came with no announcement, I assumed they needed the weekend to finalize their choice. I spent that weekend alternating between hope and anxiety, imagining how my day-to-day work life would change with this new responsibility. Monday morning arrived, and I kept checking my email, anticipating the announcement. Around 11, Marcus called a brief team meeting. My heart pounded as we gathered in the conference room. "I am pleased to announce that Brian will be taking on the role of team lead for technical operations," Marcus announced. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Brian had only been with the company for 2 years. While he was competent at his job, he lacked the deep knowledge of our systems that I had developed. He had never been the one called in for emergencies. He had never implemented any major system improvements. I maintained my professional composure during the meeting, even congratulating Brian with a forced smile. But inside, confusion and disappointment washed over me in waves. Later that afternoon, I requested a meeting with Marcus to understand the decision. I needed to know what I could improve for future opportunities. "Marcus, I was hoping to get some feedback on my interview and application." I began, keeping my tone professional despite my disappointment. "I would appreciate understanding what qualities you were looking for that I might develop." Marcus leaned back in his chair, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Ellen, you are an excellent technical resource. Your problem-solving skills are invaluable to this company." I waited for him to continue to offer some concrete feedback, but he merely shuffled some papers on his desk. "I understand that," I pressed gently, "but I am interested in growing into leadership. What specific areas should I focus on improving?" After a moment of uncomfortable silence, Marcus sighed. Look, Ellen, I will be straight with you. You are simply not leadership material. Your strengths lie in technical problem solving, not in managing people or setting strategy. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not leadership material. 5 simple words that dismissed my ambitions without specific justification. Brian has natural leadership qualities, Marcus continued. People naturally follow him. He has the right presence in meetings with executives. I see, I managed to respond, though I felt a tightness in my chest. Could you give me examples of what these qualities look like in practice, so I can work on developing them? It is just something some people have and others do not, he replied dismissively. My advice would be to stick to what you are good at. We need your technical expertise. Not everyone is meant to be a leader. I left that meeting feeling diminished. The message was clear: no matter how much I contributed to the company, no matter how critical my work was to our success, I was seen as just a technical resource. The door to advancement had been firmly closed in my face, not based on my performance or potential, but on some nebulous quality that Marcus could not even articulate. That night I stared at my ceiling, replaying the conversation in my head. Not leadership material. The phrase echoed in my mind along with the unspoken subtext. Know your place. Stay in your lane. Be satisfied with what you have. For the first time since joining Secure Solutions, I questioned my future there, but I was not ready to give up just yet. I decided to prove Marcus wrong by continuing to excel and looking for opportunities to demonstrate leadership qualities however he defined them. Little did I know that this rejection was just the beginning of a pattern that would eventually push me to my breaking point. In the weeks following Brian's promotion, I began noticing patterns I had previously overlooked. During team meetings, I would suggest an approach to solving a technical issue only to have it acknowledged with a quick nod before the discussion moved on. Then, minutes later, Adam or Robert would suggest the same idea, almost verbatim, and Marcus would respond enthusiastically. That is an excellent suggestion. The first few times this happened, I convinced myself it was coincidence or perhaps just my heightened sensitivity after the promotion disappointment. But as it continued to occur week after week, the pattern became undeniable. One Tuesday morning, I presented a detailed proposal for improving our authentication protocols to address vulnerabilities I had identified. Marcus glanced at my report and said, "We will take this under consideration, Ellen. Thanks for your input." 2 days later, Brian presented a simplified version of the same proposal during the department meeting and received immediate approval along with praise for his strategic thinking. When I privately asked Brian about this, he seemed genuinely oblivious. "Oh, I thought we were all thinking along the same lines." "Great minds right," he said with a casual shrug that suggested he saw nothing wrong with the situation. The most frustrating aspect was being expected to train Brian on systems he now supposedly supervised. He would schedule knowledge transfer sessions, where I essentially taught him everything I knew about our infrastructure. "Ellen, I need you to bring Brian up to speed on the Richardson client configuration," Marcus instructed one afternoon. "Make sure he understands all the customizations we implemented." I spent 3 full days walking Brian through complex systems I had built and maintained for years. During our executive summary presentation, Brian presented my work as though he had been integral to its development from the beginning. As I designed this solution, he began gesturing to the architecture diagram I had created months before he even joined the company. I caught Jessica's eye across the room. She raised an eyebrow, slightly silently, acknowledging the absurdity of the situation. Later, she voiced what I was thinking. "Did he seriously take credit for your work right in front of everyone who knows you built that system?" she asked as we grabbed coffee after the meeting. "Apparently so," I replied, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. The exclusion from strategic discussions became another painful pattern. Despite being the most knowledgeable person about our core systems, I found myself left out of important planning meetings. I would learn about new initiatives that would directly impact my work only after decisions had already been made. Why was I not included in the discussion about migrating to the new database structure? I asked Marcus, after discovering the plan through a casual comment from Michael. "It was just a high-level strategic meeting," Marcus explained dismissively. "We will loop you in when we get to the technical implementation details." In other words, I was good enough to implement their decisions, but not to contribute to making them. My role was being systematically reduced to that of a technical executor rather than a thought partner or strategic contributor. My frustration grew, and with it, my confidence began to erode. I started second-guessing myself in meetings, speaking up less frequently, afraid that my contributions would either be ignored or appropriated. The passion I once felt for my work dimmed as I realized that no matter how exceptional my performance, I would never be seen as more than a technical resource. Jessica noticed the change in me. "You are not yourself lately," she commented during one of our lunch breaks. "You used to be so excited about new projects." "What is the point?" I responded, stirring my soup listlessly. "No one listens to my ideas anyway, and if they do, someone else gets the credit." That is exactly what happened to Claire before she left, Jessica revealed. She told me she got tired of watching men get promoted based on her work. This was the first time I realized I might not be alone in my experience. I began noticing similar patterns affecting other women in the company. Amanda from the development team had her code review comments regularly challenged until a male colleague made the same points. Sophia's project management suggestions were overlooked until restated by her team lead. I decided to speak with Stephanie from Human Resources, hoping for some guidance or intervention. I carefully documented specific instances of my ideas being appropriated and my exclusion from strategic discussions, presenting the information as factually as possible. "I understand your frustration," Stephanie said after listening to my concerns. "But these situations can be subjective. Perhaps you need to be more assertive in meetings or work on your presentation style." Her response placed the burden of change entirely on me with no acknowledgement of the systemic issues at play. The implicit message was clear. The problem was not with the workplace culture, but with my inability to navigate it successfully. Meanwhile, Marcus continued piling technical responsibilities on my plate while limiting my growth opportunities. I found myself handling the most complex and critical components of our systems while being excluded from the recognition and advancement that should have accompanied such responsibility. During my annual performance review, I was stunned to see that Marcus had focused on minor issues while minimizing my significant contributions. "You sometimes miss deadlines on documentation," he noted, referring to a single instance when I had prioritized fixing a critical system failure over updating procedure documents. "I was handling an emergency situation that prevented a major client outage," I reminded him. "Yes, but comprehensive documentation is important too," he replied, making no acknowledgement of the thousands of dollars I had saved the company through my quick response. The final blow came when I accidentally discovered the salary discrepancy. While troubleshooting a permission issue on the shared drive, I came across an open spreadsheet with compensation data. Brian, with his 2 years at the company and his new title, was making 30% more than I was with my 5 years of experience and critical expertise. The discovery left me feeling physically ill. It was not just about the money, though, that was certainly unfair. It was the concrete evidence that the company did not value my contributions appropriately. All those nights and weekends, all those canceled plans and personal sacrifices had not resulted in the recognition or compensation I deserved. That night I called my college friend Alicia, who had experienced similar issues at her previous job. "It never gets better unless you force the issue," she advised. "They have no incentive to change as long as you keep solving their problems." Her words resonated with me, but I still wasn't ready to give up. I had invested too much of myself in this company to walk away without trying everything possible to improve the situation. Little did I know that the ultimate breaking point was just around the corner, a crisis that would finally open my eyes to my true value and how it was being exploited. It was supposed to be my first real vacation in over 2 years. I had rented a cabin by Lake Tahoe, planning to spend a week hiking, reading, and completely disconnecting from work. After postponing this trip twice due to urgent work matters, I had made Marcus promise that I would not be contacted unless there was a genuine emergency. I was just settling into the cabin, unpacking my hiking gear, and looking forward to watching the sunset over the lake when my phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Brian. "Ellen, we have a situation," he said, his voice tight with panic. "The Anderson Bank deployment is showing major vulnerabilities. Their security team is finding potential access points throughout the authentication system. The Anderson Bank contract was our biggest client, worth millions annually. A security vulnerability in their system could be catastrophic, not just for them, but for our company's reputation and financial stability. Have you checked the latest security patch implementation? I asked already, knowing I would have to cut my vacation short. We tried everything, Brian replied. Marcus says you need to come in immediately. Anderson is threatening to terminate their contract if this is not resolved within 48 hours. I looked out at the beautiful lake view I had been anticipating for months, sighed deeply, and began packing my laptop. I will be there in 4 hours. The drive back to San Francisco was filled with a mixture of frustration and anxiety. Part of me resented yet another personal sacrifice, while another part felt the weight of responsibility for a system I had helped build. When I arrived at the office, it was chaos. Marcus was on the phone with Anderson executives attempting to reassure them. Brian was frantically reviewing code with 2 junior analysts. The CEO, William Porter, was pacing in his office, periodically checking for updates. I sat up at my desk and dove into the code, meticulously examining every aspect of the authentication system. Hours blended together as I worked through the night, fueled by coffee and determination. By morning, I had identified the vulnerability and obscure interaction between our latest update and a legacy component of their system that no one else would have caught without my specialized knowledge of both systems. I spent the next day developing a patch, testing it thoroughly in our simulation environment to ensure it resolved the issue without creating new problems. After 36 hours of continuous work, I implemented the fix on Anderson's systems and verified that all vulnerability tests now passed successfully. Crisis averted, I announced to the team, my eyes burning from fatigue, my body aching from sitting in the same position for too long. Marcus immediately called Anderson to deliver the good news. I could hear the relief in his voice as he assured them that the issue was completely resolved. The CEO stopped by briefly to say, "Good work, team," before returning to his office. I expected at least a moment of acknowledgement, a thank you for cutting my vacation short and working without sleep to save our biggest client. Instead, Marcus simply said, "Make sure you document everything you did so Brian can explain it to Anderson tomorrow." Tomorrow, I asked, barely able to keep my eyes open. Yes, we are having a dinner with their executive team to reassure them about our security protocols. Brian will walk them through what happened and how we fixed it. Should I prepare for this dinner as well? I asked, assuming I would be included given my central role in resolving the crisis. Marcus looked surprised by my question. "Oh, this is just for senior management and team leads. We need you to finish the documentation tonight so Brian has it for the meeting." The injustice of the situation hit me with full force. I had solved a problem no one else could solve, saved a multi-million-dollar contract, and now I was expected to stay late documenting my work so someone else could take credit for it while being excluded from the recognition dinner. "I see," was all I could manage to say. I went to the break room to splash water on my face and collect myself. As I returned to my desk, I overheard Marcus speaking to William Porter near the conference room. "Ellen did good work on this one," William was saying. "Perhaps we should consider her for a more senior role." "She is just a technical resource," Marcus replied dismissively. "Excellent at putting out fires, but not strategic leadership material. Brian is much better suited for client-facing roles." Just a technical resource. The phrase echoed in my head, confirming everything I had been feeling for months. In that moment, something crystallized within me. I realized that no matter what I did, no matter how critical my contributions were, I would always be just a technical resource to Marcus and the company leadership. I finished the documentation as requested, my mind strangely calm, despite the turmoil of emotions beneath the surface. As I prepared to leave, after most of the team had gone home, Marcus stopped by my desk. "One more thing, Ellen. We are bringing in a security specialist from the Anderson team next week. I need you to train him on our systems." "Will there be any adjustment to my compensation for taking on this additional responsibility?" I asked, surprising myself with my directness. Marcus frowned slightly. "This is part of your current role. We are not discussing compensation changes at this time." "I saved the Anderson account," I pointed out. "I cut my vacation short and worked nearly 40 straight hours to fix a problem no one else could solve." "And we appreciate that," Marcus set his tone, making it clear the discussion was over. "But we already discussed why you are not leadership material. Your value to this company is your technical problem solving. Let us stick with what you are good at." Something inside me finally broke, not in a way that made me emotional or upset, but in a way that brought absolute clarity. I realized in that moment that I had been undervaluing myself for years, allowing the company to exploit my dedication and expertise without appropriate recognition or compensation. I smiled politely. "I understand perfectly now. Thank you for the clarification." Marcus seemed relieved by my calm response, unaware that he had just witnessed a fundamental shift in my relationship with the company. I gathered my things, walked to my car, and drove home in a state of unusual tranquility. When I arrived home, I did something I had never done before. I turned off my work phone completely. For the first time in 5 years, Secure Solutions would have to get through the night without me being on call. This was not an impulsive act of rebellion. It was the first conscious step toward reclaiming my value and setting the boundaries I should have established long ago. As I sat in my apartment that evening, with my work phone powered down for the first time in years, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and relief. Part of me still felt the ingrained responsibility to be available to solve whatever problems might arise. But another part, growing stronger by the minute, recognized that this constant availability had helped create the situation I now found myself in. I spent the weekend in deep reflection, evaluating my contributions to Secure Solutions against the recognition and opportunities I had received. I created a detailed document listing the major crises I had averted, the systems I had improved, and the revenue I had directly or indirectly helped generate or save. The total was staggering even to me. On Saturday afternoon, I called Patricia, my former professor who had become a mentor and friend. I explained my situation without emotional coloring, simply presenting the facts as they stood. "Ellen, what you are describing is unfortunately common, especially for women in tech," she said after listening carefully. "Companies often confuse technical expertise with a lack of leadership potential, particularly when that expertise comes in a female package." "So what do?" I asked. "First, recognize your market value," Patricia advised. "Then decide whether you want to fight for recognition where you are or take your valuable skills elsewhere. But whatever you do, stop giving away your expertise for free." That evening, I reached out to David, a former colleague who had moved to a competing security firm 2 years ago. Our conversation was illuminating. "Your skills would be highly valued here," he told me. "We actually emphasize promoting technical experts into leadership because they make more informed strategic decisions." On Sunday, I formulated a plan. I would not quit immediately. That would be impulsive and potentially burn bridges unnecessarily. Instead, I would redefine my relationship with Secure Solutions in a way that respected my value and established clear boundaries. I spent the rest of the day creating documentation of my unique systems knowledge, careful to include only information that was part of my job, to know nothing proprietary or confidential. I outlined my regular responsibilities versus the additional tasks I had taken on voluntarily. I researched market rates for someone with my skills and experience. Most importantly, I drafted a new personal policy regarding my time and availability. No more unpaid overtime. No more emergency calls during off hours, unless compensated appropriately. No more training others without recognition of my expertise. Monday morning, I returned to the office with a new perspective. When Marcus stopped by my desk with an urgent request that would normally have meant canceling my lunch plans, I smiled politely and said I can start on that after I return from lunch. I will be back at 1. His surprised expression almost made me laugh. It was such a small boundary, yet it clearly contradicted his expectations of my constant availability. Over the next few days, I implemented my new approach consistently. I completed all my assigned tasks efficiently during work hours, but when 6 o'clock arrived, I packed up and left regardless of what crisis might be brewing. I declined meeting invitations that were scheduled during my lunch break. I responded to after-hours calls with a simple text. "I will address this during business hours tomorrow." The initial response was predictable. Marcus seemed annoyed by what he perceived as a sudden lack of dedication. Brian appeared confused by my unavailability for his impromptu knowledge transfer sessions, but I remained professionally pleasant while holding firm to my boundaries. "Is everything okay with you, Ellen?" Marcus finally asked after a week of this new behavior. You seem less engaged lately. Everything is fine, I replied calmly. I am simply focusing on my assigned responsibilities during my contracted hours. But the Mitchell project needs those security protocols reviewed tonight, he pressed. I understand the urgency, I acknowledged. If you need me to work outside regular business hours, we should discuss appropriate compensation for that additional time. Marcus seemed taken aback. This is part of the job, Ellen. Sometimes we all need to put in extra hours. I have put in approximately 700 extra hours over the past year, I stated, referring to the documentation I had created over the weekend. I am simply establishing a healthier work-life balance moving forward. He walked away looking frustrated, but I felt a growing sense of empowerment. For the first time, I was advocating for my own value rather than simply hoping it would be recognized. The most difficult test came when I declined an emergency call at 9 on a Wednesday evening. Brian left 3 voicemails, each sounding increasingly desperate about a problem with the Thompson account database. I did not return the calls until 8:30 the next morning. Why did you not call back last night? Brian demanded when I arrived at the office. We had a serious situation. My work hours ended at 6. I explained calmly. I am happy to look at the issue now. We had to call in an external consultant, he said accusingly. It cost the company $3,000. That was a business decision, I replied. And perhaps worth considering why the company needed to call an external consultant rather than having proper documentation and redundancy in place. As I had expected, problems began to cascade without my constant intervention. Systems that I had quietly maintained for years began showing issues that no one else knew how to address. Processes that had run smoothly only because of my behind-the-scenes troubleshooting started to falter. 2 weeks into my new approach, a critical issue arose with our data synchronization system. In the past, I would have stayed all night to resolve it regardless of whose responsibility it officially was. This time, I addressed the portions that fell under my job description and left the rest documented for the appropriate team members. The next morning, Marcus called an emergency meeting. The synchronization issue had escalated overnight, affecting multiple client systems. His face was tense as he addressed the team. How did this get so out of hand? He demanded. Why was this not resolved yesterday? All eyes turned to me, conditioned by years of relying on me to solve such problems. I met their gazes calmly. I addressed the components that fall under my responsibilities, I stated. The remaining issues require attention from the database team and network administrators. But you have always handled these situations before, Marcus said, frustration evident in his voice. I have frequently extended myself beyond my job description to address urgent matters, I acknowledged. However, that approach has led to an unhealthy dependency and prevented the development of robust systems with proper responsibility allocation. The meeting continued with increasing tension as it became clear that no one else possessed the comprehensive knowledge needed to resolve the issue quickly. Eventually, they pieced together a solution based on my documentation, but it took hours longer than it would have if I had simply done it myself as I had in the past. As the days passed, similar scenarios played out across different projects and systems. The company was discovering painfully just how dependent they had been on my unacknowledged contributions. What they had taken for granted as the normal functioning of their systems was actually the result of my constant vigilance and intervention. The turning point came when the Anderson Bank system, which I had rescued just weeks before, began showing signs of instability again. This time I provided technical advice during business hours but declined to take ownership of the problem that rightfully belonged to Brian's team. By the 3rd day of struggles, William Porter himself requested a meeting with me. Sitting across from the CEO in his corner office, I maintained my professional demeanor as he expressed his concerns. Ellen, Marcus tells me you have been less available for critical issues lately. He began, his tone carefully neutral. Given your history with the company, I wanted to check in directly. Is there something we should be addressing to ensure you feel valued here? It was the opening I had been waiting for. Calmly and without emotion, I presented the documentation I had prepared, highlighting the discrepancy between my contributions and my recognition, both in terms of advancement opportunities and compensation. I have been operating as an unofficial system architect, emergency responder, and technical trainer, I explained. These responsibilities extend well beyond my job description and compensation level. William reviewed my documentation, his expression growing more serious as he turned the pages. I was not aware of the extent of your contributions, he admitted finally. Why have you not brought this up before? I have attempted to discuss advancement opportunities multiple times, I replied. I was told I was not leadership material and should stick to technical problem solving. His eyes narrowed slightly. Who told you that? Marcus, during our discussion about why I was passed over for the team lead position. William was silent for a moment, processing this information. I see. And now you are only working within your official job description. Yes, I confirmed. I am fulfilling all my assigned responsibilities during business hours. Anything beyond that requires appropriate recognition and compensation. As our meeting concluded, William assured me he would look into the situation. The next day, I received a calendar invitation for a meeting with William, Marcus, and Stephanie from HR. It seemed my stand was finally forcing the company to confront the reality of my value. What I did not know then was that David had spoken to his management about me, and a formal job offer was already being prepared. The company that had consistently undervalued me was about to discover that others recognized what they had failed to see. I was not just a technical resource. I was a valuable asset they could not afford to lose. The meeting with William, Marcus, and Stephanie was scheduled for Wednesday afternoon. By Tuesday evening, I had received a formal job offer from Sentinel Security, David's company. The offer included a leadership position as senior security architect, a salary 40% higher than what I was currently making, and explicit recognition of my expertise in both technical and strategic domains. Armed with this concrete alternative, I entered the Wednesday meeting with confidence I had not felt in months. William opened the discussion directly. Ellen, after reviewing your documentation and speaking with several team members, I have to acknowledge that we have not properly recognized your contributions to this company, he began. I would like to discuss how we can rectify that situation. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his expression a mixture of concern and defensiveness. Stephanie had a notepad ready, clearly prepared to document whatever agreement might be reached. I appreciate your recognition, I replied calmly. What exactly did you have in mind? William outlined a proposal that included a 15% salary increase, a new title of Senior Systems Specialist, and inclusion in strategic planning meetings moving forward. It was more than Marcus had ever been willing to offer, but still fell short of both market value and the leadership opportunity I sought. That is a starting point for discussion, I acknowledged. However, it does not address the fundamental issue of leadership opportunities or fully recognize the market value of my contributions. Marcus interjected, his tone slightly condescending despite the circumstances. Ellen, we have discussed the leadership question. Not everyone has the personality profile for management roles. William glanced at Marcus with apparent displeasure before turning back to me. What would you consider an appropriate recognition of your value to secure solutions? Instead of answering directly, I asked a question of my own. Before I respond, may I ask what prompted this meeting? Was it my conversation with you, William? Or was there another catalyst? William hesitated briefly before answering honestly. Your changed availability has had significant impacts on several client systems. The Anderson issue last night escalated to the point where their CIO contacted me directly. When I asked the team why it was not being resolved as efficiently as the previous incident, it became clear how dependent we have been on your after-hours interventions. And the Thompson database issue cost us that emergency consultant fee, Marcus added, as if I needed reminding. So this meeting is not about recognizing my value, I clarified. It is about restoring the unpaid labor that was keeping critical systems functioning. The uncomfortable silence that followed confirmed my assessment. I continued, my voice steady and professional. For 5 years, I have dedicated myself to this company's success. I have sacrificed evenings, weekends, and vacations to prevent or resolve crises. I have built and maintained systems that generate millions in revenue. I have trained colleagues who were then promoted above me. Throughout all this, I have been told repeatedly that I am not leadership material, that I should stick to what I am good at, that I am just a technical resource. I paused to let my words sink in, then continued. What I have come to realize is that my technical expertise does not preclude leadership capability. In fact, it enhances it. Strategic decisions about our systems should be made by those who understand them most deeply. I placed a folder on the table. This is my formal request for reconsideration. I am seeking the position of Technical Architecture Director with appropriate compensation adjustment and a seat at the strategic planning table. I would like your response by Friday. What I did not mention was the offer letter from Sentinel Security sitting in my email inbox already, providing everything I was asking for and more. William looked thoughtful. This is a significant change from our current structure. I will need to discuss it with the executive team. Of course, I agreed. I understand this requires careful consideration. As the meeting concluded, Marcus attempted to pull me aside. Ellen, you are putting me in a difficult position with this approach, he said quietly. I am advocating for appropriate recognition of my contributions, I replied simply. Nothing more, nothing less. The next 2 days were fascinating to observe. Word had spread through the office that something had shifted in the power dynamic. Brian approached me with unusual deference when he needed assistance with the Anderson system. Several colleagues expressed support privately, including Amanda, who confided that my stand had inspired her to document her own unrecognized contributions. On Thursday afternoon, a major client reported critical security alerts throughout their implementation. In the past, such a crisis would have automatically become my problem to solve regardless of official responsibility. This time, Brian came to my desk looking anxious. Ellen, we have a situation with Global Financial. Their security team is seeing multiple red flags in the latest deployment. What does the incident response protocol indicate? I asked calmly. Brian looked confused. You usually just handle these things. The incident response protocol assigns initial assessment to the team lead with escalation paths clearly defined. I reminded him. I am happy to assist if you determine my expertise is needed, but the protocol exists for a reason. He left looking flustered, and I continued with my scheduled tasks. 2 hours later, Marcus appeared at my desk, clearly agitated. Global Financial is threatening to suspend all access to our systems if this issue is not resolved by end of day, he stated tensely. We need you to step in immediately. I will need to reschedule my other priorities then, I replied professionally. And since this will require working beyond standard hours, we should discuss appropriate compensation for the emergency response. Marcus looked as though he wanted to argue but checked himself. Fine. We can discuss compensation later. Just please address the global situation now. I spent the next 4 hours identifying and resolving the security flags. The issue was complex but not unprecedented. In fact, I had documented a similar scenario in the knowledge base months ago, a resource that apparently no one had thought to consult. By 7 in the evening, the immediate crisis was resolved. I sent a comprehensive summary to the appropriate team members, including Marcus and Brian, and then packed up to leave. Where are you going? Marcus asked as he noticed me preparing to depart. We need to monitor the system overnight to ensure the fix holds. I have resolved the immediate issue and provided monitoring instructions, I explained. The on-call team can follow those instructions. I will be available during regular business hours tomorrow for any follow-up questions. His expression reflected the new reality he was facing. I was no longer the ever-available safety net that had allowed poor planning and inadequate knowledge transfer to persist without consequences. Friday morning arrived the deadline I had set for a response to my formal request. At 11, I received an email from William's assistant, scheduling a meeting for 2 that afternoon. I continued with my work, maintaining my professional demeanor, despite the anticipation I felt. When I entered the conference room at 2, I found William, Stephanie, and surprisingly Bernard Hamilton, one of the company's board members. Marcus was conspicuously absent. Ellen, thank you for your patience, William began. We have given your request serious consideration, and we have come to a decision. Bernard spoke next. Your documentation was quite eye-opening. It appears we have allowed an unhealthy dependency to develop, rather than building robust systems and clear responsibility structures. After careful consideration, William continued, we would like to offer you the position of Technical Operations Director, reporting directly to me rather than to Marcus. This would include responsibility for architecture decisions, strategic planning input, and a team of 4 senior analysts. The compensation package is outlined here. He slid a folder across the table. I opened it to find an offer that matched the market rate I had researched, along with leadership responsibilities that acknowledged my capabilities. It was essentially everything I had asked for. What prompted this specific structure, I asked, curious about Marcus's absence. William and Bernard exchanged glances before William responded. We have decided to restructure the technical department. Marcus will be focusing on client relations moving forward, while technical operations will now fall under your purview if you accept this position. In other words, Marcus was being sidelined from technical decision-making, a diplomatic demotion that represented a significant shift in the company's hierarchy. In just 2 weeks of establishing boundaries and advocating for my value, I had achieved more recognition than in 5 years of unlimited availability and unacknowledged contributions. I thanked them for the offer and requested the weekend to consider it, not mentioning the competing offer already in my possession. As I left the meeting, I felt neither triumph nor vindication, but rather a calm certainty that I now had the information needed to make a decision that honored my worth. The weekend provided valuable space for reflection. I carefully compared the Secure Solutions offer with the Sentinel security opportunity. Both now recognized my leadership potential. Both offered appropriate compensation, but only one came from a company that had demonstrated from the beginning that they valued technical expertise as a foundation for leadership rather than a limitation to it. My decision became clear not from a place of resentment, but from a realistic assessment of where my contributions would be most valued in the long term. On Monday morning, I requested a meeting with William to deliver my response. I appreciate the offer and the recognition it represents, I told William, as we sat in his office Monday morning. However, after careful consideration, I have decided to accept a position elsewhere. William's disappointment was evident. May I ask what led to this decision? Our offer meets all the requirements you outlined. This is not about the specific terms, I explained thoughtfully. It is about finding an environment that recognizes and values my contributions from the beginning, not only when my absence creates problems. I presented my formal resignation letter offering a standard 2-week notice period to assist with transition. William accepted it with reluctance, asking if there was anything they could do to change my mind. My decision is final, I assured him, but I am committed to facilitating a smooth transition. News of my resignation spread quickly. Brian appeared at my desk looking genuinely panicked. You cannot leave, he insisted. No one else understands the Anderson implementation like you do. That has been part of the problem, I replied calmly. I will document everything thoroughly before I leave. But the company needs to develop better knowledge-sharing practices rather than relying on any single person. Marcus's reaction was less direct. He avoided me initially, then attempted to undermine my transition efforts by suggesting to others that I was withholding information or not documenting processes completely. I maintained my professionalism, ensuring that all my transition materials were thorough and verified by other team members. During my final week, I was surprised to receive a meeting request from Bernard Hamilton. As a board member, he rarely engaged with employees below the executive level. Curious, I accepted the invitation. I wanted to speak with you directly before you leave. Bernard began when we met in a small conference room. Your situation has highlighted some concerning patterns in our management structure that the board plans to address. He asked thoughtful questions about my experience, listening attentively to my responses. When I mentioned the not leadership material comment that had been so pivotal in my journey, he shook his head. That kind of limiting categorization has no place in modern business, he stated firmly. Technical expertise and leadership capability are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they should be complementary. On my final day, I completed my exit interview with William and Stephanie. The discussion was candid, but professional, focusing on systemic issues rather than personal grievances. What would have made a difference? William asked at one point. When did we start losing you? When my expertise was used to solve critical problems but deemed insufficient for advancement, I answered honestly. When being indispensable became a limitation rather than an asset. When I was told to stay in my lane rather than being invited to contribute to the broader vision. As I cleaned out my desk, Jessica stopped by to say goodbye. I am going to miss you, she said sincerely. but I am proud of you for standing up for yourself. Thank you for your support throughout all of this, I replied, genuinely appreciative of her friendship. Will you stay in touch? Let me know how the new position goes. Absolutely, I promised. My first day at Sentinel Security marked the beginning of a new chapter. David introduced me to the team as an exceptional technical leader whose strategic insights will strengthen our security architecture. The immediate acknowledgement of both my technical expertise and leadership potential was refreshingly different from my experience at Secure Solutions. In my new role as Senior Security Architect, I was immediately included in strategic planning sessions and invited to contribute to product roadmap discussions. My technical recommendations were not just implemented but built upon by collaborative teams that valued expert input regardless of title or tenure. 3 months into my new position, I received a message from Jessica. Thought you would want to know. Marcus has been moved to a special projects role after several major client complaints. The new CTO is completely restructuring the technical team. They are still struggling to replace what you did. I felt no satisfaction at Marcus's demotion, only hope that the restructuring would create a healthier environment for the talented people still working there. My focus was on building something positive in my new role, rather than dwelling on past injustices. 6 months later, I had established a technical mentorship program at Sentinel, with a particular focus on supporting women in technical roles who aspired to leadership positions. Remembering my own journey, I ensured that these mentorships emphasized both technical excellence and leadership skill development, challenging the false dichotomy that had limited my own growth for too long. Looking back on my experience at Secure Solutions, I recognized the valuable lessons it had taught me. I learned that your worth is not determined by others' recognition of it, but by your own understanding of your contributions and capabilities. I discovered that setting boundaries is not selfish, but necessary for both personal well-being and professional respect. Most importantly, I realized that true leadership is not about title or authority, but about impact, vision, and the ability to elevate others. I had gone from being an undervalued technical resource to a respected technical leader, not by fundamentally changing who I was, but by changing how I allowed others to define me. The skills and insights I had possessed all along were now recognized and valued in an environment that understood their worth. For anyone facing similar situations, I would offer this advice. Document your contributions. Understand your market value. Set clear boundaries and remember that being indispensable does not mean being irreplaceable. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to stop saving a company that does not value you appropriately and instead find one that recognizes your full potential from the start. Have you ever been told you were not right for a role you knew you could excel in? What did you do about it? Let me know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of professional self-discovery and empowerment. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your value is not determined by someone else's inability to see it.